Welcome to our podcast, A Novel Talk, co-hosted by Carl Lee, and I'm Wendy Kendall, cozy mystery author. Hang on to summer with my sweet treat of a summer beach read, a new mystery and romance. Cherry Shakes in the Park, an adventure of dangers, divas, and frothy delights. Available with my other books on Amazon, Barnes& Noble, and other online retailers. My romantic suspense, Snow-Kissed Cookies to Die For. It was the finalist for Best Suspense and Reader's Choice at Killer Nashville. And also enjoy my mystery book that began it all, Cat Out of the Bag. That's Cat with a K for Katherine Watson. She's a purse designer and amateur sleuth who goes from designer bags to body bags when she's faced with a murder mystery. In the prequel, Pistachio Makes a Splash, Catherine and Mayor Brenda Durling investigate a chilling cold case. Thank you to all the readers who've let me know how much you enjoy my books. And here comes your co-host.
And one of those avid readers of yours. Hi, my name is Carl Lee, and I write paranormal fantasy. However, associating with Wendy for so long, I have been bit by the mystery bug, and my current project, Brendan McCoy, Witch Detective, is going to be book one of a series of paranormal mysteries.
Awesome, awesome. Also awesome, our guest today. He is award-winning and best-selling author David Matthew Barnes. With 15 novels, 3 collections of poetry, 7 short stories, and more than 70 stage plays that have been performed in 3 languages in 12 countries. To date, he has also written 6 produced screenplays. He is the definition of a prolific writer. Welcome to A Novel Talk, David Matthew Barnes.
Thank you very much, Wendy and Carl. It's really wonderful to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And we also appreciated the novels that you allowed us to review for this recording. I enjoyed your novel, Marijuana Mermaid, in which you explore the meaning of family. Can you tell us a bit about how Leah's family differ from, say, Monica or Sabrina's?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And that was really an objective, I think, for me as a writer when I was writing Marijuana Mermaid, was to show not just socioeconomic differences, because clearly Leah's family is not nearly as quote unquote wealthy as Monica and Sabina's, but so of course there's that difference. But Leah's family on the surface seems very broken because it's been impacted by divorce. Leah's been living with her mother in Chicago and a little bit estranged from her father, who started a new life and is remarried in California. And by comparing those 3 families, what I wanted to show is that money does, and it's a cliche, but money doesn't buy happiness kind of thing. And in Monica and Sabina's case, both young women seem to have it all: popularity, beauty, so forth, but their family life is lacking terribly, where Leah doesn't seem to have much in terms of material, wealth, or gain, or even social standing. And despite the divorce, her family is still her strongest sense of community in her life. And that family unit evolves in the book, which I was really excited about, like sort of starting Leah's family at their most broken or most fragmented, and then moving them to a place of some sort of reunion or resolve. And so, yeah, it was also too, both Monica and Sabina's behavior in the book, I think, from like more of a psychological standpoint, didn't necessarily justify their behavior, but certainly lent itself to why they would maybe make the choices that they did.
Yeah, 3 very different families.
Yeah.
And I just loved how you showed those to the readers. You show also in the novel how fluid relationships in high school can be. It's been a hot minute since I've been in high school, but
Me too.
a couple of hot decades maybe. But I do remember, being part of this group of people, and then all of a sudden that erodes and new groups form. And I remember that from that fluidity, and you show that very well. What drew Leah to Monica, and conversely, what drew Monica to Leah? Because they don't seem to be the most matched pair.
Yeah, no, they were both such fun characters to write because, they seem like opposites, with Leah sort of being quote unquote the good one, and Monica sort of being the evil or the mean one, if you will. And she certainly is that. Monica certainly is. I mean, she's capable of murder in the book. But I think that what they disliked in each other was the thing that reminded themselves about themselves and each other. So there was a little bit of mirror devising that I did pretty subtly in the book. I don't know if readers picked up on it, but Leah is really drawn to Monica's power and just the sense of, she thinks that Monica is all the things that she never wants to be, and vice versa. I think Monica is jealous of Leah's family unit, the fact that she has a mom and she has, a sort of the more traditional family unit that I think Monica craves. Monica has a very successful father, and she has a brother that she doesn't have a very good relationship with, and her mother's been dead since she was 5. So I think she craves all the things. She's used to getting everything she wants, but she doesn't have that one thing, which is a family unit and people that truly love her for who she is. And Leah has that. And I think that what I really kept going back to when I was creating them in terms of that love, hate, cat, mouse, was I felt like they were magnets. And I tried to, they wanted to be in the same room with each other to just kind of absorb each other's energy. And when they were apart, I wanted them to sort of crave each other's presence again. So it was a little bit of I don't know if you've seen the film from the 90s, Single White Female, but it was a little bit of that psychology of wanting to consume someone else's life, at least the elements that you secretly desired but would never admit that you desired that part of someone's life. So they were in many ways different versions of themselves, and so
right.
that's why they were so fun to write. Because
and read.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And read.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, Leah's the protagonist, Monica's the evil villain, kind of thing. So those are very easy to categorize. Sort of here's the main character, here's her nemesis. But I think hopefully it came clear that I tried to go a little bit deeper with that in terms of female relationships in high school and how complex they are.
Yeah. You already talked about Leah's family, but her relationship with her parents are strained.
Yeah.
You mentioned that. We start with them divorced. How does Leah keep them in each other's lives?
When I was first writing the book, there was an early draft where Leah was sort of determined to bring her parents back together, thinking that would solve all of her problems. And I took that element out, and instead I let that happen organically. So not like Leah is the bridge because of, the third act of the book, if you will. What happens in that story-wise naturally brings her parents together in the same place physically. And from there, the connection is sort of reignited. I also left it kind of vague at the ending too. Don't want to give away too much, but about the future of her parents. But they were still, working on things, and I thought that felt more realistic to me than this sort of the family's all back together and now we're going on a road trip.
What I like to call a Disney ending.
Right. And so I didn't want to go there because it didn't feel true to Leah's experience leading up to that. So, I thought. Divorce and parent struggles, I write a lot of young adult novels, and that certainly is a common theme because I think a lot of young people are dealing with divorce. And when you deal with divorce in the middle of high school, which is already a tough part of the world to navigate, I think that it's kind of feels even more exasperated. It feels even and more intense. And I think what I wanted to do too was, starting them out divorced and starting Leah out in one place and then moving her to another. So she was sort of the fish out of water, no pun intended, because the book is Marijuana Mermaid. But I really, again, I wanted the relationship of her parents, to be sort of in the background of all the things that she was going through in terms of relationships, and just how relationships evolve so much. And I felt like, we started her mom and dad in a season of their lives and then got them into another by the end of the book. And divorce, divorce is such an emotional thing for everyone involved, especially, the parents, but also for the child. And in Leah's case, I think she was in a lot of denial that she hadn't really processed her parents' divorce and what that meant to her. She was acting out, but didn't really have the understanding of, maybe this is because my parents were separated and I'm feeling a little bit lost, so that's that was why I did that. And I wanted to create something that I felt a lot of young readers would connect with and relate to.
I think you did an excellent job of doing that.
Thank
you. You have several really great settings in this book, and I love setting. It's very important to me. What did you base Neptune's Cove Park on? Because it just seemed very real.
Well, thank you. And I did, I took a little creative liberty, which I think any author would do. When I was really young, I'm originally from Southern California and spent many young years growing up there. And there was an amusement park, which sadly is no longer there, called Marineland of the Pacific. And it was in Los Angeles County. And I think it was in like Palos Verdes, Palisade Parks, like that area. So very south of Los Angeles on the coast. Beautiful oceanfront aquatic theme park. They had a mermaid show. And I went there on a field trip. I must have been, I want to say like second grade, might have been even younger. And it left such an impression on me that when I started to create the world of where Leah worked, knowing that, an underwater mermaid show was going to be a key thing in the book, I went back to those memories and I researched the park, and there was such a great history, which of course I didn't get to include in the book, about the real place. And I thought it was very cinematic. It almost looked like different pieces of movie sets that they had used for different parts of the park. But that mermaid show that I saw as a very young child, the vision, like the visual part of it, the aesthetic of it, stayed with me and clearly sunk into that subconscious and came out in this book. And so when I was painting the picture, doing the word painting on the page to create the scene or the setting, I kept thinking of the, sight, smell, sounds, and so forth of that place. And again, I'm sad that it's no longer around. All the great places are gone, right? Another childhood place gone, but it served me well for this book, for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of Mermaid, and the Mermaid show, Leah connects with one of the mermaids that she sees from the Mermaid show, and it's kind of a strained relationship. And I just love, and I don't remember the mermaid's name, but the mermaid and Leah. How does that relationship direct Leah's life? Because I got a sense that changes happened in Leah's life based on her brief experience with this woman.
Yeah, so Ophelia was another really fun character to write, and originally she had a larger part in the book, and then when we edited the book, we pared her down a little bit because I loved her so much that she started to take over the book, and it's Leah's story, not Ophelia's. But so Leah, I think with Ophelia was a sense of disillusionment, and I think when we're young, high school, 17 in the case of Leah, that we like that transition into adulthood, one of the hardest things I think is seeing things as they really are versus the way that we see them from more of an innocence of youth. And so by sort of peeling away that innocence and Ophelia, not being this, glamorous mermaid that she thought she was, and this imagined life that Leah had come up with in her mind when she met Ophelia, versus the reality of Ophelia's life, that I really wanted to explore that theme of being disillusioned, of like, oh, the adults are not as cool as I think they are. And there was a little bit of Leah wanting to be like her and emulate her. And then and she was a mermaid in the show. It was exactly what Leah wants in the book, in the first part of the book. And so then I think at a certain point, as you said, part of that transition that Leah goes through and growing up in the book, she realizes that maybe I don't want to be like this woman. Maybe I want to be like myself. And so that was really kind of what I was going for with, this sort of enigmatic, a little bit mysterious character. And again, she was fun to write.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I took from their relationship, was that helped Leah see. Leah wanted to be Leah, not Ophelia.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, good. It's a good sign. Good news.
David, Matthew, I'm going to ask you now to switch gears a little bit, because I really want our listeners to also hear about your book, The Everlasting Gift. It's such a poignant story that I enjoyed thoroughly. And in The Everlasting Gift, your character, Charlene, she has an incredible talent as a pianist. She has a real flair for music and for teaching and inspiring others. But I don't think she at first realizes how much. She faces a series of disappointments and tragedies at the start of her story. Can you tell us a little about Charlene, how she faces adversity, and what that reflects about her personality?
Yeah, of course. So Charlene is one of my favorite characters that I've ever written. I literally fell in love with Charlene when I was writing The Everlasting Gift, because she was so flawed in the beginning, and dealing with, in this case, she had lost both of her parents at the start, before the book starts. So when we meet her, she's in the middle of sort of unprocessed grief, is what I call it. And so going through that emotional journey with her through the book as a writer was so fun. Not fun, maybe that's not the right word, but it was so invigorating to experience that with her, of finding her way emotionally. The teaching part, I was a teacher myself for 17 years, and I certainly drew off of that. I think, teaching is certainly a calling, and so often we see books or films about teachers when they're already in the classroom. And I was really wanting to start Charlene from that initial impulse to teach, and follow her journey up to becoming a teacher, which I think is a little bit different, hopefully, than most sort of, main characters that are teachers in a novel or a film. And I love that you talked about inspiring others, because I felt very inspired by Charlene and her journey. And I was really careful that a couple of characters that surround her in the book say that to her, to echo that, so that and Charlene, the character, has gotten such a wonderful, tremendous response from readers that really connected with her, which I'm so happy about. But a lot of people talked about the fact that she was a very inspiring character, and a very, even though she had gone through so much, had come through with such great attitude, spirit, and so forth. And then I really, the adversity that she goes through in the book, I wanted to make it as real as possible. Charlene was greatly inspired by a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends, Jessica. And Jessica and I both worked for the city when we were undergrad students for about 5 years. And it was one of the best jobs I think we both ever had. We worked with inner city youth in an after-school program, very similar to the program that Charlene runs in the book. We didn't necessarily do a holiday show, but to this day, I mean, Jessica and I have been friends for over 30 years. She still inspires me. She has that same sort of really wonderful outlook on life that Charlene has. And so that spirit, I think, really came through in Charlene's character. And I think one of the things I love about Charlene, because you talked about personality, I love that she changes so much in the book, that she's kind of got this chip on her shoulder in the beginning and down on her luck and has, been fired and all these things that have happened to her. And that she still believes, that she still has this flicker of hope and faith, which carries her through all of that. And that was one of the many qualities I loved about her when I was creating her and writing her.
Hope is such a strong emotion. It's beautiful, and this is such an uplifting story. Now, as Charlene is studying to be a teacher, a temporary job opportunity comes up that she can work, and she needs the money so she can complete her college studies. But this this opportunity requires her to return to the grade school that she graduated from. Can you preview a little this decision that Charlene has to make? How difficult it can be for a person, and in this case Charlene, to, as they say, can you go back again to a part of your history? What is it that's worrying Charlene, and what does she think she's going to find there?
I think early in the book, when the opportunity presents itself to her to go back to this specific school. So there's a scene in the book where she's sort of like in a staff meeting, and they're giving assignments for the holiday season of what school each of the city staff are going to go and work at. And so all these young people, mostly college students, no one wants to go back to this school because of its reputation, the neighborhood that it's in, so forth, so forth. And Charlene knows of the school because it's where she comes from. She hasn't been back to that neighborhood in many years because it reminds her of her parents who are no longer with her. And I thought forcing her to go back to a place that forces her to reconnect with her past is the only way that she's going to be able to move forward as a character and as an adult emotionally. And I thought this was going to set up a really interesting challenge for me, because I have this sort of, holiday romance in the background of this really emotionally complicated character who is going back to her roots, so to speak, to be able to move forward. Now, she doesn't realize that she needs to do this, of course, as a character until after the fact, until she's on the other side of it. But I feel like so many of us shy away from that, of going back to a place to sort of face things on, or like just head on and work through things just by being in place. And speaking of place, I feel like place is can be such an emotionally triggering thing. Like if we go back to a place that we haven't been to in a long time, and all the memories kind of come flooding back up that are connected to that place. And so I really wanted the neighborhood and the school to kind of serve as secondary characters in the book, almost like she's getting reacquainted with them as people, and they're reflecting back to her who she used to be versus who she is now. And I thought, going back to a community that she was once a part of and reconnecting with that community, and then end up fighting for that community, I thought could as a novelist sort of prove for me to be the most interesting story to tell.
Definitely it was. And like you say, this is sort of a very human struggle that we all go through in our lives, and to read about it with this vibrant character is really rewarding to go page to page through it with her.
Thank you.
Charlene is working on a stage show at her old school. And it's with an interesting group of young students. I loved reading about these kids. In particular, I think about Victor with his dancing skills and Ivy with her singing skills. Behind all of these kids' talents, though, this group of young students are facing some difficult emotional issues. Can you talk a little about these young people who are finding their way?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, from being in the classroom myself as a teacher for almost 2 decades, Often as a teacher, we have conversations and time with young people, even in some cases more so than their parents do, because we see them every day and for many hours of the day in some occasions. Um, it was really important for me for Charlene to see versions of herself in the young people that she was serving, that she would be able to recognize the impact that she had on their lives immediately just by being there, by showing up. And in the book, I was really intentional about Charlene sort of creating a safe space for young people like Victor and Ivy, which I think many, many teachers do in their classroom and so forth every day. And so many young people thrive in those settings because often it's the only safe space that they have in their lives. And it's interesting too, going back a little bit, there's a line in the book that Charlene's boss from the city, from Parks and Recreation, that she reports to, says to her, always smile at a child because you never know if it's the only smile they're getting for that day. And my boss said that to me many years, that exact thing, and it stayed with me forever because it can certainly be applied to adults too. But so I wrote from that place. And so it's interesting. Victor's who deals with bullying and being a male dancer and in school that's not very accepted, and have struggles with his own father about that. There's a scene in there, and I don't know, Wendy, if you remember this scene, but there's a scene on the playground where it's just Charlene and Victor, and she's having sort of a real talk with him about staying true to himself, but that it's going to be difficult to do that at times, but you still have to do that. And that scene, I didn't add in until the very, very like almost to print version draft of the book, because I felt like I had written that scene long before in an earlier draft, and then I took it out, and it stayed out for a good while. But interestingly enough, it's one of the scenes that readers talk about the most when they reach out to me about the everlasting gift, is that moment of connection between Victor and Charlene. And Ivy, I think, is a younger version of Charlene, and certainly serves as a sort of a surrogate mother figure to her as well. So it's sort of interesting, like, Charlene working with young people feels needed and sees her purpose and sees the impact. And I think that hopefully that encompasses what teaching feels like, of working with young people and young lives, and the influence that teachers can have on all of us.
Yes, that scene on the playground that you're referring to, it's memorable. It's beautiful. It really is.
Thank you.
Going back now, when I think about Charlene at the start of the story, the first image that pops into my mind is her kitchenette with just one chair at the table. Your imagery in your writing is so powerful throughout this book. She's alone, but she reaches out and makes connections with some people. One example, an interest develops for Charlene with Ivy's father, Jake. Can you tell us a little bit about Jake?
Oh, Jake, yes, he's my favorite leading man. So Charlene is my favorite. Those two will forever be, no matter what book I write or movie I write, those two will always. There's just something about them that's so pure and so just when I think of Charlene and Jake, I think of joy. They make me feel joy. They're so happy together. So Charlene and Jake is also very lonely. But doesn't speak about his loneliness. He kind of he has to be a single father to Ivy because he's lost his wife, and his life has changed completely. This guy was married and had this family and everything was going along. He's a contractor. He's doing all the things that he's, to make himself happy. And then his wife dies and his entire world changes. And he's a little angry about that. And he's got a little bit of bitterness when he first meets Charlene, and he's kind of dismissive of her in the beginning. I didn't want that instant connection, right? Because sometimes it takes us a minute or two to realize, like, oh, that person is really interesting, and I want to talk to this person. And so there was so much I loved about Jake. I love that Jake challenges Charlene, that he asks her the tough questions and he poses those those tough ideas to her and pushes her out of her comfort zone, which she needs. But she does that to him too. So that's why I feel like they fall in love in the book, because in many ways they're equals, but in many ways they need each other to move forward. And I really loved writing their love story. I thought it was just such a, in this crazy world, to write about two people finding each other and creating a new family together and making sense of things, and having the holiday, Christmas, in this case Christmas, behind them as a backdrop, and such a magical romantic time of the year anyways. I really felt like he grew as much as Charlene did, he's a main character, but he's not the main character. So what the time that we get to spend with him, I wanted to show that growth in every scene that he's in, even if it was just baby steps. He was still changing and evolving as a man, which made him become a better partner for Charlene, and even a better father to Ivy. And just, I think that he worked through a lot of his grief, just like Charlene did, by again coming to terms with his past. In this case, the marriage that he had with his wife who passed away. He's a really great guy. I feel like he's flawed too. I didn't want to create like that saint, that man who rides in on a horse and saves the day. Yeah. He comes to Charlene with some issues and some baggage, which most adults do. Which is probably why I loved these two characters so much. And I think I'm so happy that readers have really embraced them as a couple.
Yes, and also thank you for the reminder that this is Christmas. It's set in the Christmas season, the holiday season. And so just a little nudge to our listeners. This is a fabulous gift. It's such a beautiful story. Give it as a gift to people that you really want to inspire. Okay, there's this quote: "Do whatever it takes to bring some sunshine into this world." Now that is a noble thought in this big world.
Mm-hmm.
Charlene has a beautiful relationship with her grandmother. Can you talk about this connection between them and how Charlene's grandmother inspires living this philosophy?
Yeah, Charlene's grandmother. So when I wrote one of the last scenes between the two of them, I will tell you, I cried a little as a writer. I made myself cry at my own book. That's so corny, but it's true. So I, like Charlene, I had an incredible relationship with my maternal grandmother, and she shows up in many variations in my novels. And in this case, Charlene feels that her grandmother's all she has left, and likewise, Alma, her grandmother, feels that the same way. These two women have had to be many things to each other. With Charlene's parents passing, Alma had to step in to be a mom and a dad, and all these things to young Charlene to help guide her into adulthood. And so that connection, that bond, is so deep. And I wanted to show like a generational difference, that Alma has lived a long life and is incredibly wise. And, is not necessarily a highly educated woman in terms of academia, but she has lived it and experienced it and knows it. And, she loves Charlene so much and just wants so many great things for her. And I always think of Alma as a source, much like my own grandmother, this source of just unconditional love. And I think that Alma's the one person that Charlene can truly be herself with and not feel judged, or that there's expectations or so forth. And I really loved just how much these two women loved each other as grandmother and granddaughter, and that they carried within them so much culture and heritage and history and legacies from their family, and that Alma knows that Charlene's going to carry on those traditions and to continue speaking of the people who are gone to keep their memory alive. And I think I really wanted to make it clear when writing those scenes between Alma and Charlene that Alma was instilling that in Charlene, of just gentle reminders about, bringing some sunshine into the world, do whatever it takes, And I think that Charlene drew so much strength off of Alma, and then had to end up finding that within and drawing that from herself when she couldn't from Alma anymore. So yeah, yeah, it was Alma and Charlene, a lot of joy behind, love and joy writing behind them.
Oh, that's
behind
wonderful.
that story.
Great characters. There are so many reasons why this important stage show for the school could fail. And I found myself cheering these characters on, each with hurdles before them that threatened the performance. Sometimes it takes great sacrifice to make sure that the show must go on. And even then, no one knows if it's going to end on a high note or a sour note. In The Everlasting Gift, the tension builds skillfully to an exciting finish, including a finale twist that I never saw coming. What is important to do in writing when building to important plot goals?
You know, in this particular book, and I can't say this about every book that I write, I knew the ending of The Everlasting Gift before I knew the beginning. So I knew, you know, an interesting, normally I work linear chronologically, like beginning, middle, end. But with The Everlasting Gift, the entire way I was writing towards that end, that I like the outcome that I knew I wanted for Charlene. So I think more than any other of my novels, I worked from an outline, pretty strict outline, the most for The Everlasting Gift, because so many things had to happen along the way in Charlene's life, barriers included, conflicts, obstacles, things she had to overcome, people she had to meet in order to get her to that final place. So I knew what I wanted for that final picture, the last couple pictures of the book. The stage show represented so much. I mean, yes, it's just a holiday variety show at in the multi-purpose room at an elementary school that the district has forgotten about. But for Charlene, it's everything, right? It's overcoming, childhood trauma from a bully that she experienced. That's in the book as an adult, and that she sees something through. She has a finished goal, a finished picture, and she's brought all of these, she's created community without realizing it. She's brought all these people together with a shared goal, shared project in mind, and they all have this shared experience, and their lives are all the better for it. And so the show represented that. The show represented the thing, the thread that was going to pull and bring everyone together in this community to have something to fight for and believe in. And Charlene was their guide, and without, she sort of like stepped into that role without realizing what she was doing. But yeah, I thought it was really important. So when I was writing it, in terms of plot points and plot structure and the logistics of the mechanics of writing, I really mapped out moment by moment, step by step, Charlene's journey. Like I knew exactly what those pivot points were going to be, that she was going to shift a little bit in terms of who she was and her beliefs. And it was a challenge to write. Interestingly enough, Everlasting Gift was a screenplay before it was a novel. I wrote it when I was in the professional screenwriting program at UCLA. It was my final project. So I had it was workshopped, and I had really great feedback from the instructor and my fellow writers. And it's still a screenplay. It's out right now. I'm hoping that it'll find the right home for it. Lots of interest from networks that love holiday things. So good thoughts for the future of The Everlasting Gift in that form. But then, and writing the screenplay.
David, Matthew, you have shared so much with us with these two books. I was wondering if I could convince you to share just a little bit more and do a reading for our listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. I'm going to read to you the first chapter from Marijuana Mermaid.
I love that book.
Thank you. The chapter is called The Aquarium. My mother barely spoke to me during our stop-and-go drive to O'Hare. Traffic was bad. She muttered a few profanities under her breath, frustrated. I realized her anger was directed at the other drivers, but I also knew she was still pissed at me, rightfully so. I remained a silent passenger, convinced if I opened my mouth, I'd say the usual wrong thing and add to the damage I had caused. It wasn't until she pulled up to the curb under a sign that read "Departures" when my mother said, "I really hope you don't screw this up, Leia." To dig the knife in deeper, she added, "Your father didn't have to agree to this, you know." I reached for the door handle, anxious to escape. I know. Realizing this was the last face-to-face conversation I'd have with my mother for the foreseen future, I wrestled with a heavy need to say something more, but the words wouldn't come. What could I possibly say to her after what I've done? "I'm sorry you have such a screw-up for a daughter. Forgive me for the fire and the vodka. I don't want to leave you. Chicago is where I belong. I promise not to be so awful to you. Please let me stay." Once out of the car, she fished my suitcase from the trunk. I grabbed the handle of it and squeezed. Then we stopped moving. My mother looked into my eyes. I tried my best to avoid her stare or the fact that she looked much older than she was in my mind when I replayed conversations between us, real and otherwise. "You need to make California work for you." I nodded. "I will." She leaned in and we shared a very awkward, obligatory hug. "Have a safe flight." She turned back to the car. I watched her slide in behind the steering wheel and check her mirrors before inching out into the stream of airport traffic. Then she was gone. I wasn't certain, but I could have sworn there were tears in her eyes. Later, after checking in my suitcase, printing my boarding pass, and making it through security, I jumped in line at a coffee shop near my gate. I ordered a large iced caramel chai latte, knowing I would regret doing so later on the plane when I would definitely have to pee. Like an orphan, I walked alone to the gate, sipping on my drink. People moved around me, rushing to another scene in their lives. I found a seat in the waiting area that faced the glass. Through the window, I could see the plane being prepped by the ground crew. It was just a matter of minutes before boarding would begin. I plugged my phone charger into an available outlet, but then felt dumb for doing so. Who was I going to call? Who was going to text me? My mother? She was probably already back home, standing in the center of our apartment, relishing her newfound freedom. My father? Not likely. I suspected he was too busy stressing about my arrival and the years neither of us had made a solid effort to be a part of each other's lives. My friends? I could count them on one hand. Then I drifted back to a memory I'd long forgotten. I was young, around 9. My mother had decided we were going to spend the day together, just the two of us. We started the morning with a big breakfast at a restaurant on State Street, then a walk through Millennium Park. We finally made our way to the Shed Aquarium, which instantly became my favorite place I'd ever visited. We were standing in the wild reef section. I was in awe, staring through the glass at the underwater world in front of me, wanting to join the fish in their aquatic universe. "I need to tell you something," is how my mother began the conversation. To my surprise, she reached for my hand and held it. "Your father and I." It was a rare moment. My mother was at a loss for words. She had never seemed so affected by something. Immediate sense of dread hit me. I let go of her hand. "Your father and I are getting a divorce, Leah." I don't remember what my mother said after that. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and begged for the fish to bring me home. They were my new family. My old one was broken. After the gate agent made the boarding announcement, I unplugged my charger and shoved it into my front pocket. Now in line with the other weary passengers, I clung to my boarding pass like my life depended on it. Outside, the sun was setting. The sky was a mixture of sherbet orange and pale pink. Already I missed Chicago, the girl I used to be. I knew she was still somewhere in the aquarium, hoping someone would find her, take her home, teach her to swim.
Oh, that was amazing. Thank you, David. I love that. I love that book, and I love that scene. It was so mournful, I think is a good word.
Well, thank you. That's a great word for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much, David Matthew Barnes, for joining us for a novel talk. Can you tell us what's next for you and your fans?
Absolutely. I have a baseball-themed romance called Pitch Out. My publisher, Kayal Publishing, they'll be releasing that in June, just in time for a good summer beach read. And then also in 2023, my first horror novel about 2 female serial killers. One is 19 and the other is 76. And the book is called Dummy. Has a male mannequin, really creepy male mannequin that's featured in the book. So both of those are my next novels out in 2023.
I can't wait. Those both sound so unique. I love it.
Thank you.
Well, listeners, you will want to check out the website dmatthewb.com for more information about David Matthew Barnes and his works. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, a novel read leads to a novel talk.